possibly one of the most beautiful songs ever written, performed by my beautiful guest, Laila Biali. Hello.
Hi, Cathy. Thanks for having me on the show. I can't believe you're doing this every day. It's amazing.
Well, in all reality, so I think what happened was for the first maybe, let's see, I think it was about 8 months. I did it 6 days a week live and then took a day off. Then I just decided, okay, now I want a little more time. So then I went down to 3 days. But then about, I don't know, a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, I realized, I can actually put the archives up so people can, still get it, because people really like the shows. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. So now it is 7 days a week, but
With
but
an
I'm
archive.
not. Yeah, exactly.
It's
But
still impressive.
I'm doing live 3 or sometimes 4 days a week because some people just can't fit into Monday through Wednesday.
Yes, fair enough.
But enough about me. How are you? You're in
I'm
Canada.
I'm in Canada and we're making headlines around the world right now, especially in Ontario where I am because we're back in lockdown.
I thought
Um,
Canada was doing really well with. Seriously, I did. But maybe it's Toronto that I'm thinking of, or is Ontario?
no, no, well, it's shifted. So Atlantic Canada has formed its own bubble. We have to give a bit of a pandemic overview, don't we,
Yeah,
in these times? So
yeah.
Atlantic Canada is in its own bubble, and life is almost back to normal for them because they've
Oh,
been very careful about who they let into the bubble. You have to quarantine as soon as you arrive,
oh.
anybody from elsewhere in Canada. And then BC was also doing well. I feel like the variant has kind of changed things, but by and large, within our country, BC is still a pretty great example of containing things and allowing people to move forward with their lives in some capacity, but safely. And Ontario, really, in a way, is in crisis at the moment, or so the headlines say. You know, cases are rising very quickly. Projections were that we would be at 10,000 cases a day for our province, which is very high relative to what we've seen thus far in the next month if we didn't kind of clamp down. And so that's what the government did. But there's, of course, as you might imagine, a lot of debate as to how they did it. And so they've already rolled back a couple of restrictions. But here we are, spring is here for the most part, and people are still going out and enjoying the better weather, although there is effectively a stay-at-home order in place.
Oh.
So it's really this interesting tension, I would call it at this point. But how's it in LA? What are things like for you guys out there right
Well,
now?
LA, the restrictions have lifted a bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so restaurants are opening more. The
amazing.
ones that have been left. I have a gig, and
That's awesome.
yeah, it's outdoors in a patio, and for people who feel comfortable coming out, they showed up last time in you know with a good crowd, and people they're wearing masks, but and some people aren't. I mean, I know of one group of people who they live near Austin, Texas, in a town that I can't remember the name of, but there's there's a few people who are well known on the side of speaking against, the restrictions and the
Right, anti-maskers, I guess
yes,
we would call
yeah,
them,
sort
right?
of.
Yeah,
I mean, there's been all kinds of names of them, but I mean, people
right.
who I think seem intelligent and sane.
Mm,
But anyway, they have actually, I don't know if I'm sure they didn't build this town, but they moved to a town outside of Austin. And the law is that there are no masks allowed or no masks required.
okay.
And there's a school for, children that they don't have to wear masks, they don't have to social
Yeah.
distance. And yeah,
And how
and
are they
so
doing? Are they good?
they're
Probably, right?
They're doing fine. So it's
Oh,
this is such an interesting time. I mean, I've had such everybody has had such, you know, I don't think you can think either way or and not still be in conflict with somebody, you know.
that's right. And as you said, intelligent people on both sides. I mean, my sister's a doctor, and at the moment, I'm taking my cues from the people who are in the front lines, medically speaking, and they are in crisis. And they are saying, please, please abide by the health regulations. They are begging us. And so when I see that, then I'm inclined to do the things that, thus far the epidemiologists say are working and are effective. But of course, there's also debate around that,
Yeah.
and thoughtful debate. But it's tough. We're still in. I can't get the zones straight, Cathy. Whether it's the gray zone or the red zone.
I think
I
the
think of it as a
red
red zone.
is, yeah, I think red is what you guys are in.
Right, exactly. But anyway, enough about that. Thanks for asking. I actually had a gig myself this morning, which is surprising, but it was a virtual thing. It was a virtual reality setup that Bell Media, one of our major telecom companies here in Canada, invited me to be a part of, and everything was very distanced, and there was plexiglass
Now, by
and
virtual
masks.
reality, you're saying that people there are wearing
So they
uh
pre-taped us with this special 360 camera. I took footage of it. I'm going to post it on my social media accounts tomorrow. But basically, they captured the room and me, the performer, in a way that people at this huge conference that are attending virtually, of course, they're going to be able to put on those VR visors later on in the week and experience this show as if they're in the room.
oh, that's virtual reality, right?
Yeah, three-dimensional.
Right,
So
right.
it's pretty wild.
Speaking of that, I'm surprised that there's not more use or talk about holograms. I really am because like 25 years ago or some 20 years ago, there was it seemed like that was kind of budding in
Yeah,
the industry. And this is the perfect time for that, right?
absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. So, I mean, you think about the practical applications of all these things, and oh gosh, I mean, I guess in a way, the hologram experience is more interesting in a live situation, funnily enough, right? Like
Yeah.
you've seen, was it Tupac where they brought him into the Grammys? I can't remember what the event was. Somebody probably here on chat can chime in and say it was this event. But I know they did it with Tupac, and didn't they do it with Nat King Cole, with Natalie Cole when they
Yeah.
had their,
Yeah, their
and it's like
duo.
you produce this person as if they're in the space with you.
Yeah.
But I hear you, Cathy. This is the time for technology to spread its wings as it is, and I know that there's one artist here in Canada. Her name is Jill Barber, and she did a show that was virtual where it was all filmed. I mean, this was high production, so not many of us have this kind of budget, but she was filmed in green screen in a space, and then they placed her and her band in a vintage jazz club. And so that was what the
Oh,
viewers
that's cool.
experienced. Isn't that amazing? So that to me is
Yeah.
exciting, rather than just seeing somebody in their living room yet again,
Yeah,
filmed
yeah.
on their iPhone, which I commend the artists who are out there doing that because we got to do it somehow. But it is fun to see those who have the capacity getting creative.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on all of that. That's very sweet of you actually, to say I commend those people. I do too. I think and you saw that a lot in the beginning of the pandemic. Like people didn't really care if they were making mistakes or, it was like I'm just trying this out, I'm just jumping in the water, and trying to swim.
There was a real charm to it, right? Like Jim Cuddy. Well, actually, I think Jim Cuddy was fine. He's a major name here in Canada, but there was a venue in Canada, the National Arts Center, and they ran a
Sorry, the
program,
what?
National Arts Center, and
Okay.
they ran a program that was called Canada Live, and they were giving out, paying people decent money to live stream from their homes. And there was so much grace. I mean, you would see name artists sometimes where they were flipped sideways because they didn't realize that the way their phone had turned, and there was no one but them and their dog. So the dog isn't going to say, hey, by the way, you're on your side, and so I think it drove a lot of people nuts, but it was also, there was a charm to it. It was like, wow, we are in another time and place now. It felt like, and everybody was just trying to make it work.
That's funny. If you did see your dog go like this, you might think about it, Let's see. So let's see. We did get a few comments. Let's see. So it's and I'll, as long as we're stopping here to read comments, I'll tell you. Jody Prosnick said hi.
Hi,
Kirk
Jody.
Morrison says hi.
Oh, awesome.
And a friend of mine, Toby Simmons, and let's see, Paige.
Yes,
Renalson.
Paige.
Hello. You can read these later, but
yeah, I will. I know
she
it's
says,
tough.
I know. She says hi, lovely Laila, and more.
Aww.
And then apparently they did that with Michael Jackson.
Oh, the hologram.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Neil says hello with Nev from Live with Nev.
Okay,
Neville.
I'm actually, you know what? I'm now peeking.
You're seeing? Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm going to peek on here, and then I can actually see but I don't want volume. Otherwise, I won't. I see the comments, so now I can comment, I think. Yay.
Yes, and I'm just going to do one thing that I can do from here, which is maybe share it. But you're sharing on your page, right?
I did. Aw, it's so nice to see everybody. Oh my goodness. See, this is how we do community now, right?
Yeah.
And it will change. We'll get back to being together in live and in living color, as you are, Cathy, outdoors doing those shows. But in the meantime, I treasure the opportunity to be online in this space with people responding in real time, because, Facebook is has become a venue in and of itself. Yeah.
It's true. And YouTube.
Right? Yes, YouTube as well.
As well, yeah. Let's see. So I want to find out more about you. I can't remember how it was that I became aware of you. Maybe through like the New York group of singers like Kate McGarry and people like that, right?
Theo Blackman.
Yeah. So I'm friends with all those guys too. And this is kind of starting in the middle probably, but did you live in New York?
I did for 8.5 years. And I'm told that it takes 9 years to officially become a New Yorker. New Yorker magazine, that was the number they gave. And so I didn't quite make it to official New Yorker status, but I feel that city is grafted into my soul. I miss it still. I miss it so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend, one of my friends just went there for a week. I said, how was it? And he said, well, very different, very quiet, but it was still New York. It's, anyway, I feel this leading back into the state of the pandemic. So anyway, I'm going to pass that part. So, I really loved A Case of You. That was so beautiful. And what I loved was that you had made it so personal, which is really hard to do with a song such as that, it's iconically Joni, but it's such an incredible song. Oh my God. And I think it was just beautiful. And you're so able at the piano. So I'm sure that is part of how you develop it and get yourself comfortable with it, right?
Definitely. And in that instance, because I have significant training as a jazz musician, in my early days of arranging, the inclination was to turn songs on their head and add as many crazy chords as I could. Have you heard Dirty Loops? There's a band called Dirty Loops They're out of Sweden. And they take songs by Justin Bieber and Adele, and they just the music becomes so dense and exciting.
That. Yeah.
But for me, I think as I've matured,
Yeah.
the goal has more been to preserve the heart of the song
Yeah.
as much as I can, because it is a tribute. I'm not just sort of trying to appropriate the song. I'm paying tribute to the original composer. And for so many, including myself, Joni Mitchell's material is sacred. And so I thought, well, what can I do at the piano that is unique and new, but still is not such a huge departure from the original?
Yeah.
And that's where that vamp, that you hear at the beginning and throughout comes in. Anyway, but thank you. And that's actually my husband on djembe. So
Oh, really?
yeah, which is really lovely to play a love song with him.
Cool. That's great. And so you started, I'm assuming that you are from Canada originally. Is that
Yes,
correct?
I'm from Vancouver. So West Coast girl.
Oh, okay. Cool, cool. Yeah, so Vancouver feels almost like America to me. I mean, the U.S., it's pretty close, isn't it? Don't you think?
Do you mean in terms of geography or kind of the spirit of the city, or
Kind of the spirit of the city, I mean, it's close to Seattle, and
Exactly.
Seattle is very particular,
Right. Yeah, I've always felt like there are cities in Canada that have sister cities in the US.
Yeah.
So for sure, Vancouver's sister city would be Seattle. To me, funnily enough, Toronto's sister city is actually, even though LA is such a different animal in many ways, there's something about the music scenes that, I don't know, there's a likeness to me. And then New York sort of feels a little bit more like Montreal to me in some ways.
Yeah.
And then Boston, Halifax, Nashville would maybe be Calgary or, Austin. But I mean, growing up in Vancouver, we would always cross the border and go to Seattle to do our shopping as a family. So I felt a real relationship with that city. And now it's funny, having lived in New York, when we go and perform in Seattle, it always feels small to me. But I remember when we would drive down there from Vancouver, it always felt very exciting and, sort of a whole other world.
Did you probably played piano from very young? Is that correct?
Yeah, I started when I was 3.5, and my mom says that I climbed up onto the piano bench and started trying to play Sesame Street by ear, the melody, sunny days, keeping the clouds away. And so she said, uh-oh, I think we have a musician on our hands. And she started me in piano lessons, and that was where it all began.
Oh, and what about the singing? Were you like just a real basic? I mean, I'm going to be a singer too.
No. My journey as a vocalist is complicated, to say the least. And I know that a number of folks who know me, who are watching right now, they've heard this story, but I will just quickly give the Cliff's Notes or the Coles Notes. So I always sang. I loved to sing. My mom would wake me up in the morning on Sundays to go to church by blasting opera. That was her cruel way of getting me out of bed. But it kind of stuck in my ear, and I would, I'd run around the house, thinking I'm queen of the night. And at some point, somebody in my high school, I would sing in choirs because that was what we did. We had great music programs. And actually, there's a fight right now in Victoria to keep music in our schools, which I think is critical, because that, Cathy, is how I got my start as a singer, was with the choirs that everybody participated in growing up, whether you could sing or not, And then, of course, they would have honors choirs that you could audition for, and I would do that. And so gradually I started to learn a little bit about singing. I did some music theater. When I was in grade 8, I was the lead in Little Shop of Horrors. I was Audrey, Yeah, I forget this, her funny little New York accent that I had to do. It's an Audrey too. And I wore the blonde wig, and and it was this belting, suddenly Seymour. And, but as you might imagine, between the choirs and the music theater, it took me a minute to find my vocal identity.
Yeah.
And when I started to sing, I injured my arm. So that was the big turning point. On one of those trips down to Seattle,
yeah,
we were rear-ended on the highway.
Oh.
And it was a bad accident, and I hurt my shoulder, and it would refer down my arm. And I had wanted to be a concert pianist, but those dreams got dashed by that fateful event.
Wow.
And that was around the same time that I was pivoting to jazz. And so I was using mostly my left hand. I was really unhappy just playing with my left hand. I mean, can you imagine 15, the whole world is ahead. It felt like my whole life's ahead, and I'm injured. And so my classical dreams were dashed, and I pivoted to jazz, which sort of felt like the rebound boyfriend. I had a very complicated relationship with jazz as well at the outset. And then I started singing more, and I even took a few lessons with this Russian teacher. He's no longer alive, but his name is Nikolai Kolesnikov, and he didn't speak a word of English.
Oh my God.
But I took maybe 5 lessons with him.
Wow.
And he really wanted me to be an opera singer because I had this coloratura soprano voice. And I remember his wife, Olga, calling up my mom and saying, she can't eat any spicy foods. She needs to do that. Like, just immediately taking this very seriously. And I mean, 16-year-old Laila wasn't game. I was like, no, I'm not giving up salsa. And so anyway, I got a scholarship to go to Humber College for jazz as a pianist, but because I was still just using my left arm, they said, you know what, come to the school and you can do voice as well. And so I did, but I was a terrible student because, again, I really just wanted to be playing piano. And I was very uncomfortable as a singer, really shy, because I felt like a fish out of water. It was not my instrument. I mean, we're all singers in a way, right? But yeah. I was trained as a pianist, and I felt like that dream had been snatched from me. And what on earth was I doing trying to sing? And I was surrounded by all these people who were really confident in their voice. And it took years before I really owned my voice. And so anyway, it was sort of the next big fork in the road for me was when I was asked, this was after I'd graduated from college. I did get back to playing with both hands, and piano kind of became the dominant instrument again. But then I continued singing because I saw that there was a lot of potential in being able to sing just professionally and practically. I was playing a gig at Canyon Creek, this restaurant, and they said, we want a singer. So I was playing piano, and they said, we want a singer. And I was like, I'm not going to split my money with a singer. I'll sing myself. So I started singing out in the world more. And then after I'd graduated, I was given the opportunity to open for Chris Bodie across Canada. And I did it playing piano and singing. And I came up against so much criticism. I had people saying, this woman should not be singing. She needs to quit. She should stick to piano. But then Chris asked me to join his band as a singer. Oh. He asked me to replace his singer, Jean Jolly, who's actually in LA, I think. And that was really mind-blowing. Yeah. And so I was thrust onto center stage with Chris Bodie, Billy Childs, Billy Kilson on drums, and Mark Whitfield on guitar, and Chris. And it was just, I mean, wow, talk about baptism by fire. Yeah. And it was at that point that I knew, okay, I think I have to own this singing thing. And that was in my mid-20s. And I think, yeah, from that point forward, it's just been such an integral part of who I am and what I do. So that was hardly the Cliff Notes. That's my story.
No, but that's interesting. And I was going to ask when you started owning your singing. So you actually answered my question. Yeah. So at that point, when you were in the Chris Bodie band there, did you, I'm asking this mostly for, I think, for people listening, because It's just, it's an interesting part of the process, you know.
Yeah.
And so did you do things at that point to study and research and practice your singing? Or did you were just responding to the band and what you were doing?
I always wanted to study, and I have been so interested in the technique, the physiology of vocalizing. And, I've worked closely with Joe Laurie singing backup for Sting together, and she can do anything. And Lisa
She's great.
Fisher, same
Yeah.
thing,
Yeah.
and I would take a lesson here, a lesson there, and for whatever reason, I just couldn't make the leap to really connecting with the information I was being given. And if anything, what it would do, Cathy, is it would put me in my head more than it did my body. It would take me out of my body and put me in my head. And my fear was, uh-oh, am I going to sort of lose my identity that I've established over these years vocally? But it's still something that I really want to pursue. So to answer your question, no, I've never done the hard work of like studying, whether it's technically or even just like scat singing. It's never really been my thing, but I'm fascinated by it, especially by those who do it well. But I have ears because of my training as a pianist, and I think I always had good ears, even growing up. So jazz for me, whether as a pianist or singer, was, a familiar place to play with the melody and play with harmony and respond to what you're hearing in the moment. That's almost second nature to me. And in that sense, jazz is a much better fit than classical.
Yeah, that's refreshing to hear, actually. And I mean, I know very well about the voice technique, and I know about that idea of getting out of your body and into your head too much. And yeah, well, I've spoken about this many times, and I won't go deeply into it. But uh, the last few years, I have this chronic cough, so
Oh,
I've had it for about 20 years. So it's affected me in ways that I kind of knew about but didn't,
yeah.
and breathing, and literally at some point I realized, oh, I'm holding my breath
Mm,
back. So of course, that's what sound is. Sound is breath that is stimulating the vocal cords into vibration.
yes.
So and then I realized, and this was through my present teacher, who's wonderful. Then I realized, because he kept saying, get out of your head, just do it. I know you're a teacher and I know you're smart and blah, blah, blah. And I just, for a minute, I was, I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then I went, oh shit. I do know what you're talking about. I'm in my head. I had no idea I was in my head.
Right.
And so God, there's so many layers to that stuff. But the thing is, in more recent time, the thing that I enjoy, which is part of the reason why I love your singing and playing, uh, I enjoy watching somebody really deliver who they are, and you can tell when somebody's thinking technically and, observing
Right.
themselves or not observing themselves and just giving out. And so I've been focused on that, over the last few years because, once I realized I was thinking too much, then then I thought, okay, well, who do I really like to watch, and let's get this, let's get that going, come on, and I'm sure there were good times in over my career, and I'm sure some people who heard me over the years never would think that, it's
Right.
all very relative.
Yes.
But anyway, it's cool and interesting that you have done that. So do you practice singing or like technique or warm-ups, or you just sing?
I do have a warm up. So remember I said I've had a handful of lessons with different
Yes.
teachers over the years. And there was one gentleman, Jeffrey Heward. And the reason I would find these teachers because I would work either as a singer or as a pianist with all these singers who were so much better than I at vocalizing. And they were just so much more in command of their instruments. And I'm not talking about the artistic side, I'm talking about the technical side.
Yes.
And to me, technique is a means to an end, right?
Right.
And where I feel a bit impaired or where I feel I fall short, if I'm really honest, is I don't have sufficient technique to explore the full range of emotions and sounds that I wish to. I still feel like I'm only able to give like 60% of what I might be capable of. And so I'd watch these other singers doing all these incredible things. And I would say, hey, who's your teacher? Who did you study with? You know, like I know Jo Laurie is basically a master level Estill. You know, she uses the Estill method, and she studied with, is it Joe Estill? And you know, and a lot of like Kate McGarry and Theo Bleckman, they're into the
Jeannie
somatic
Levine.
singing, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I took one lesson with her, and
Yeah.
again, like I just wasn't ready, I don't think.
Yeah.
And then in Toronto, there's a wonderful singer, Kira Callahan. It's been ages since I've been in touch with her, but I played a gig with her, and I thought she sounds so seamless from
Yeah.
bottom to top, you know. So I said, "Who's your teacher?" She said, "Oh, Jeffrey Heward."
Oh.
And so I took a couple lessons with Jeffrey Heward, and he gave me this one vocal warm up. And Cathy, that's the vocal warm up I have done for like 15 years now. And it's the only one I know, and it's the only one I'll ever, well, I shouldn't say that I'll ever do, but because I still, you know, I feel like if I weren't a mom, and I wouldn't trade motherhood for anything, but if I weren't a mom and pandemic had been more about having time to incubate and try new things, that might have been an interesting time, or this would be an interesting time during which to really try and study virtually with somebody and explore. Because I think the fear for me has been when I'm out there gigging or recording on a regular basis, going into the training, like into a training zone, which I think study has felt scary to me. But if I could have like a few months where I'm not in the field just to play and experiment, that would be really interesting to me, you know, to see if I could gain ground. Because it's almost like you have to sound worse before you start sounding better and reaching new levels. I guess it's like gearing down on a bike or something, or I guess gearing up on a bike, so that you might lose some speed initially, but then you're able to actually gain more ground more quickly because you're pushing yourself. And that's what I'd like to do vocally, but I feel like it's so hard to carve out that window. I mean, maybe it's like a horn player trying to change their embouchure. That must be so difficult.
Yeah.
And you might sound worse before you sound better. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah, I do.
That's been my
Totally.
fear.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. And I've gone through that in the last few years.
Okay.
A few years ago, I was so disenchanted with my singing that if a friend of mine had not been so supportive financially and otherwise, I might have stopped. And I found a teacher. You know, when you find a teacher who really resonates with you, right? It's very special. It's spiritual and special. And so this gentleman, Stephen Cronauer, he just gets me, and we just totally connect. And I've also taken a few lessons from Theo Bleckman too, and one from Kate. But yeah, because of Stephen, I stopped with the method that I had learned, that I had practiced, that I had taught, that really worked well, and probably just had me singing all those years. And then I felt like what you described, the bicycle. I felt like I kind of dropped because the other method that I had been using was, you know, strong and pushing me through, but that's not what I needed. I needed something different. and I needed to use my air again, and so now I really it's exciting because I feel like there's something that I understand that I might have done it when I listened to old stuff. I don't know if you're like this too, but when I listen to old stuff that I did, I hear myself doing good back then. And now why? Or was it the cough? Was it my thinking? Who knows? I don't really know. But anyway, now I feel like I'm gaining that again, but with knowledge. So it's exciting, but also, and I don't have to tell you this because you're a mom, but the time that you give things it's what it is. At some point you have to allow yourself to do what you're doing and enjoy what you're doing, and don't berate yourself for things you're not doing, right? Like
Absolutely. And you know what, Kathy, I just want to jump in with, for those joining us,
yeah.
a very public example of what you and I are describing here is Adele. So
Oh, yeah.
Adele was just, like just belting. And it was that, I don't even know how to describe it, but like just everything she had. And it wasn't the healthiest. It sounded amazing.
Yeah.
Now, do you recall, I think it was at the Oscars when the Bond song Skyfall was nominated for an Oscar for like whatever that category is, right?
Yeah.
And or an Academy Award. And she performed, and she did not sound like herself at all. She was using way more kind of head voice, and I was like, "Where's Adele? What did she do with Adele?" And that was in this tender time where, because she was wrecking her voice and it wasn't sustainable, she had to learn a completely new way to sing. And the world got to see her
Yeah.
at her most vulnerable. And you know what? She didn't sound that great. And I remember I was like, uh-oh, well, this is going to be interesting. Fast forward to her next record, 25, and she's singing her tuchus off. She sounds better than ever. She sounds like the Adele we grew to know and love, but now it's healthy.
Yeah.
So she did that thing, right? Where
Yeah.
she sort of slowed down and got like even knocked off her bike maybe for a minute, and it was
Yeah.
awkward.
Yeah.
But look at the ground she gained, and now, I mean, she's no longer performing, but it was incredible to hear her. What a witness to singers like you and I,
Yeah.
to see her at the very top of her game,
Yeah.
so healthy and more herself than ever in terms of her sound and power and all that. So that was really exciting.
Isn't that isn't that isn't observing that for somebody like you and me who's a singer and who's been through our own trials and tribulations, doesn't that make you kind of weepy?
Oh, it's
To
totally moving.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank her for having been willing to take that narrow road.
Yeah.
She had to. She had to. She knew that it was either find a new way to sing or stop singing altogether, because she was hurting herself.
Yeah.
But what an inspiration to see where she ultimately landed. And
Yeah.
obviously she's a hugely gifted singer naturally. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But she had to learn how to sing in a completely different way. And that cannot have been easy. And we witnessed a moment where, you could see how hard it was for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to tell the people listening on YouTube, my and Layla and I were talking about this before, how technology has just been like ramming it up our what, and just changing for no apparent reason. So I can't answer you right now on
Aw.
YouTube. But I might be able to, but anyway, I'll try and figure that out. But Taylor and Kiki have been commenting to you, and Kiki Kiki's loving this. She's crying.
Oh, hi, Kiki. And I see one of my dear friends, BC Clarity Carlton Martin. Hi,
Yeah.
darling. Just took a peek at the comments to see who's here.
Yeah.
And a lot of singers on this feed, which is really fun to see.
Yeah.
Natalie. Yeah. Oh, man.
And Taylor, she's studied with many people and worked with a lot of people. True, but he wants to know what is the biggest. Now, this could to me this could apply to mentors or whatever. But what was the biggest lesson of any of your teachers taught you about finding your voice? What lessons stood out to you?
Of the various vocal people.
Well, he said teachers, but
anybody.
I'm going to add into that just mentors. Anybody. What was the biggest lessons that you may have? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I'll share a few.
Yeah.
So as a pianist, okay, so I here's another transition I had to weather. I had to learn how to move from reading music and interpreting music to improvising.
Yeah.
And as a pianist, that was actually very scary. I had good ears, and so that helped me. But I think because I had so much vocabulary as a classically trained pianist, and I was playing, high-level pieces, Paganini etudes by Liszt, and so on, it was very humbling to be stripped completely of that technical prowess, and as a jazz musician to have to learn a completely new language and to have to slow down, and it wasn't really starting from scratch, but it felt that way. And it was a teacher, a drum instructor, Jim Blackley, who invited people up to his house north of Toronto to do jam sessions. And he could see how in my head I was as a pianist. And he came up behind me. I was playing the piano. He stepped away from his drum kit. He grabbed my arms and he just took them and he started slamming them on the piano in the middle of a solo. And I was like, what is?
Wow, that's really
awkward.
Weird. Yeah.
It was physical. It was weird. But the message, sorry, my 10-year-old, I'm making sure he doesn't disconnect us here. Yeah. The message was, get out of your head and just express yourself, emote. This is not about playing the right notes. This is about expressing emotion. This is about what you have to say. And he had to physically take me out of my head. It was almost like the equivalent of grounding, right? They talk about like when your nervous system is ramped up, grab a flower and smell it. Take off your shoes and put your feet in the grass. Mm-hmm. Just there are things that we can do to ground ourselves. So what he was doing was he was grounding me at the piano, putting my forearms on the instrument because I was so afraid. And I was being governed by fear rather than love. That sounds so airy-fairy and cheesy.
No, it doesn't. Fear and love, I am so into that. Those two things as the basis of everything. So it doesn't sound airy-fairy to me at all.
In life and in music. And he had to cajole me out of my body and out of my fear. And even though he was aggressive, it was from a place of love, and I knew the difference. So that was a big moment for me. And then another moment for me as a pianist, I had this one teacher, Don Thompson. He's amazing. He's a multi-instrumentalist. He played with George Shearing for many years. Don Thompson.
Oh, yeah, sure, of course.
Yeah, so plays vibraphone, drums, piano, bass. He's amazing. And he was the opposite of what I thought I needed as a student at the time. So I wanted people to say, here's the scale you're going to learn that's going to unlock your jazz vocabulary. Here's the pattern you can learn, But Don would say things like, the piano is an orchestra.
Yeah.
And I would be like, oh, Don, give me something practical. But years later, just that statement, the piano is an orchestra. I mean, that actually unlocks all kinds of creativity.
Yeah.
So for me, that moment has been the gift that keeps on giving. The piano is an orchestra, and not just the notes and the keys, the strings, the hammers. You know, I mean, you watch Jamie Cullum at the piano, or, you know, there's a guy in Canada, Michael Casehammer. He's kind of like the Jamie Cullum of Canada. He's inside the piano. He's in there with his fingers and with mallets, and, you know, the piano is an orchestra. And then I think as a singer, it was probably more my peers, like Jody Prosnick, who was, you know, with us earlier, and my husband and co-producer. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, Cathy, less so now since I've become a mother. Motherhood beat it out of me. But I was always a perfectionist. I wanted to impress people. I wanted to do well. I thought if I performed well, then people would love me. You know, that was like a big thing growing up. And it just really stayed with me even into adulthood. And as I would learn new things. And I think that's why I was so afraid of failing.
Yeah.
And, you know, it took my husband and people like Jody Prosnick to say, Laila, you know, I would compare myself to, at the time, I don't know, I'm trying to think of what singers, like anyone from Norma Winston to who you interviewed, you lucky girl, Norma Winston to, you know, I don't know, Nora Jones to Aretha Franklin to Shirley Horn. And I just would, or as a writer, Joni Mitchell, Leonard Cohen. I mean, of course, you're always going to fall short if you're comparing yourself to these iconic people.
Yes.
And it was my husband and Jody and other friends who, I mean, this is such a cliche thing to say again, but they were like, the world just wants Laila. Like they just want you. They just be you. Yeah. So then I had to do the hard work of mining, well, who am I? Once I got rid of all those voices that said, well, you're not Cécile McLaurin-Salvant and you're not, you know, Jasmine Horn. I started to really connect with, like, why do I love music? Yeah. Why is music meaningful to me as a pianist, as a singer, as a human being, as a mom, as a friend, as a person in the world? You know, as someone who feels called to do this, what do I have to say? Yeah. And once I really gave myself permission to explore myself, that became critical to finding my way forward and continuing to move forward, because the critical voices are always there. They're always there. Sometimes they take the form of a critic, like a genuine, like a bad review or the nomination you don't get, or, you know, the gig you're rejected for, or whatever it may be. But if I allow, like, that sense of who I am and who I am, there's a word I'm looking for, you know, and it's not just for my own sake, but for the sake of those I'm sharing my music with. They need me to be my most authentic self. They don't need another Cécile McLaurin-Salvant. She can do her. She's unbelievable, but let her do her. So it's the best thing that I can do for myself and my listeners, my friends, people who are connecting with my music, is staying true to myself. So that really is the daily work.
That's real success.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because, Cathy, in a way, it's sort of like it's within us, right? It's always there. It's within us, but it's also kind of that North Star, or that, you know, true north. Like, it's like, that is also the goal, the target, and it's here and it's here. And it's a beautiful thing. It's really anchoring, right?
Beautiful. It's a very beautiful thing. Yeah. And it's about being in the moment, and it's about looking ahead. And that's life lessons, and even singing jazz or playing jazz lessons. You have to be in the moment, and you have to be looking ahead. And, you know, I think it's really a beautiful thing to have these lessons, like you were speaking before about music in schools, being kind of under trying to be undermined,
Yeah.
in the government. And it's just horrifying to me that we have people in charge of these things who don't see it. They must be from another planet. They just
Yeah.
must be, because not to see the value in teaching children art, and it's just, it's horrifying to me, really. I just can't believe that they do that.
It
And
should, yeah.
it's more, so it makes it more important, I think, for artists, for individual artists, to actually continue and do what you're speaking of, to
Yes.
find true north, and, to keep moving that way. I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. Gosh. Um, I'd like to listen to something. Would you can, I'll show you YouTube and you can pick something, or how's
Oh,
that?
wow. Well, yeah. So, gosh, I'm trying to think of what would be fun to share. I mean, people maybe have had enough of quarantunes, right? I did this sort of quarantine series where I took songs from my latest album and had all of us record ourselves and film ourselves at home. And then my husband, who's a drummer but also an engineer, you know, sonically compiled it all together and, and created these fun little quarantunes videos. So I have one of those for a song called Sugar. That could be fun. Very
Okay.
different from A Case of You. Totally different. And it
Is
it
this an
shows
original one, or is
it is, and it's
oh,
very
okay.
saucy and cheeky. And it's not for everybody, but it shows another side.
Is
Oh,
this it,
that's
or
my
this it?
official music video. Yeah, oh, the Quarantunes, that's the one.
Okay.
So let me just quickly introduce the band.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the band. These are all singers and players who are on this song on the album. And so Mike Mosmar, who is with Snarky Puppy, and he actually played trumpet on the song, but here he's singing. Michelle Willis, who's been touring with David Crosby a lot in his Skytrails band, she's singing backgrounds. There's one person who wasn't on my album, and that's Rob Christian. He's on saxophone. Glenn Pacha's on B3. My hubby is on percussion. Larnell Lewis, he's another Snarky Puppy guy. He's here in Toronto. He's on drums. He's actually on an electronic kit. And then Rich Brown is on electric bass. And I want to tell you just a little bit about his role in this song, because I wrote this song from the piano, and there was this little riff I created. Bum, ch, ga-dun, ga-dun, dun, 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 dun. And it was inspired by a D'Angelo song called, I think, Sugar Daddy, but it has a completely different melody and lyrics and all this stuff. But Ben and I were a little bit worried that it was too close to this D'Angelo song. And so we went into the studio and recorded these almost cold for the album. We rehearsed it once. And Rich came up with this bass line right on the spot, Cathy. This funky bass line. You'll hear him play it in a minute. And it's one of those instances where he probably should have been given a co-writing credit, because that bass line ended up being the backbone of the song. So I'll just leave you with that.
Oh.
And this is Sugar, the Quarantunes version.
Oh. Can't wait to hear this one.
Sugar, because I'm all so tired. Sugar, because I'm uninspired. Sugar, because I work so fast. Sugar so sweet, it's gonna help me last. Sugar, because I didn't plan. Sugar, to help me understand. Sugar, so I can make it through. Sugar, so sad. Sugar, because I feel so bad. Sugar, so I can just forget. Sugar, because my mind is sad. Sugar, because I'm lonely still. Sugar, because there's a hole to fill. Sugar, because I don't cost much. Sugar so sweet, it's like a human touch. Sipping your soul, cheating your pie. No one to get in your way. Dipping the honey, now we're flying high. No better end for the Sugar, because it's on my brain. Sugar, when I can feel the shame. Sugar, because you disapprove. Sugar so sweet, it's gonna help me through. Sugar, because you comfort me. Sugar, you know you set me free. Sugar, when I can feel the leg. Sugar so sweet, I want you know my bed. Sipping your soda, eating your pie. No one to get in your way. Dipping the honey, now we're flying high. No better end to the day. Give me my chocolate, my fudge, and my cake. Nobody's body but mine. No one can tell me it's all a mistake. 'Cause I don't feel nothing but Sugar my friend, sugar my foe, sugar my fast, sugar my slow, sugar my high, sugar my low, sugar my stop, sugar my go, sugar my good, sugar my bad, sugar my joy, sugar my sad, sugar my anthem, sugar my black. Sugar my friend, sugar my foe, sugar my fast, sugar my slow, sugar my high, sugar my low, sugar my stop, sugar my go, sugar my good, sugar my bad, sugar my joy, sugar my sad, sugar my anthem, sugar my black. Sugar my friend, sugar my foe, sugar my fast, sugar my slow, sugar my high, sugar my low, sugar my stop, sugar my go, sugar my good, sugar my bad, sugar my joy, sugar my sad, sugar my anthem, sugar my black.
Wow, that is cool. Oh my
And
God.
it's funny, Kathy. I mean, talk about the critics in our heads. We listen, and I'm like, oh, I sound terrible vocally. But you know what? It was a moment in time, right? We were all
Yeah.
home. I was
Yeah.
supposed to be touring that music for 5 months around the world. And just 3 weeks before the album launched, the whole world went into lockdown.
Yeah.
And so we created this virtual stage, and everybody, like a lot of us weren't recording ourselves professionally because we didn't have the setup.
Yeah.
And so you'd throw up your iPhone,
Yeah.
give it your best. And I mean, thank goodness a lot of those players do have a relatively professional setup. But, we were just doing what we could. And I really feel like these videos are going to be cultural artifacts at some point, right? Like
Yeah, I
a
agree
sign
with you.
of these times.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It's so
so-
true. But it's so much fun. That was great. That was really fun, and it was nice to hear the introduction about it, but still it was yeah, great tune, just great fun. I want to ask you something. I read, on your page, it said there's no boxing in. I think it was a quote, and, I think that's a really interesting aspect of an artist, an artist who has been working and working on their craft over the years. and then has different CDs that reflect the different parts. One thing I'm curious about, because you really have a lot of different things that you can do. Do you put everything on one record, or do you tend to make a project of, let's say, music like that, like Sugar?
Yeah, so now I am more concept driven. If you listen to my first 2 or 3 albums, they really are all over the place. And like, sort of, look what I can do,
Yeah,
and there's
yeah.
this. But I remember I was living in New York at the time and met with this potential manager. And he said to me over dinner, he said, if you would just stay in one lane, you might have a hit record on your hands. And I mean, relative, like within jazz,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Hit record within jazz. So,
And we all know what that means.
I don't know what that
Okay.
means. So anyway, but it just, I don't know. So then fast forward to my self-titled album, which came out in 2018. And I remember people saying, why a self-titled album now? This is your 7th album.
Yeah, yeah.
Usually that's what people do for their first.
First, yeah.
But it was because my manager at that time, he said, okay, he didn't say pick a lane and stay in it. What he said was, he actually got out a piece of paper
Yeah.
and he drew a big circle and he said, let's talk about who you are and let's talk about your sound. And so we put a lot of adjectives into that big circle. And then we started mapping out the songs that I was beginning to workshop and, and try out live. And we would try to look, okay, well, what's the character of that song? And what are the adjectives that describe that song? And if there was even one adjective in that song that connected it with that large circle, then that song could be on the final record. But if it didn't connect with that big bubble in the middle somehow and was a little outside the bubble, then we would leave it off. And it was to try to find some common ground between all the songs. And Laila Biali, it is a very diverse record, but there are a few kind of through lines. There are like some things that connect one song to the next. Instrumentation is a big part of it, using the same personnel and allowing their distinct musical character to really shine through and inform the sonics of the record. The mix engineer we chose, he kind of put his sonic stamp on it, and that brought those songs together. But otherwise, they were very, the music was really diverse, but not as much as previous releases where you really would have one song that sounded like it was from one album and one song that sounded like not only like it was from another album, Cathy, but that it was by another artist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think as we've moved into this world of playlists and Spotify, every time I get ready to release another album, I start panicking because I know that there are these playlist editors who you might kind of be on their radar, and then if you do something that completely is a total divergence from something you released before, you might alienate them or lose them. And
Oh my God. I just have to interrupt for 1 second.
Yeah.
That is so reflective of now.
Yes.
And it used to be, I used to feel that, except just for audiences coming to a show.
Right.
Because we weren't online.
Right.
But I used to feel that exact thing. And maybe in that way it's lucky now because I don't really care anymore.
Right.
But anyway,
right.
sorry, I just had to put that in. It's just so, it's, history repeats itself basically.
Well,
but that's such a struggle, for an artist. It really, until you decide what you decide, that's an issue that you think about.
Absolutely. And I will be honest, I'm thinking about my next big move as an artist. I've been releasing, these singles, the Joni tune that you played. I covered Leonard Cohen's Anthem, and we released that in September. I did a Christmas thing. I did the Joni thing was for Valentine's Day. And, but I'm thinking about my next statement, because in jazz, you know, we do still like to release full albums or EPs, not just singles. And it has me losing sleep at night, you know, and in a little bit of an identity crisis once more, you know. And thank God for my husband, who just keeps reminding me, let the music guide you, let the music dictate your next steps. It's just difficult when you feel like you have 5 different directions you could go in, and they're all equally authentic, and it's just a matter of choice. And I'm a Libra. I'm not even into astrology, but
you have to balance.
I'm a true Libra, and it's sort of like, I think I'm just always doing this. And so, you know, and I have to be honest, I admire my art friends who are just like, screw what people think and screw those Spotify editors, you know, you just do your thing and be authentic, and it's all going to work if you just do that. But I can't help but think, well, what are people expecting? And, you know, and what might work in the, you know, as a follow-up to what I just did. And,
well,
you know,
I feel like there does have to be some of that, you know, because if you are a person who does consider the business part of it, which I think we all should, actually, you know, even no matter how small that is, you know, at least have a viewpoint of it, you know.
Yeah.
So, you know, in your support, I really think that's a good idea, you know. Yeah. But also, like your husband says, you know, those kind of reminders we really do need to be reminded of, because sometimes that, well, more often than not, that will lead reality to be created in a particular way. Yeah. And so wouldn't we rather have this connection and truth to our music lead the way, as opposed to doing something for Spotify or whatever, you know?
Totally. And, you know, it's interesting. I just re-released an album that came out in 2015 that was really a departure. Mm-hmm. It's more like indie pop rock. Sean Everett mixed it. He mixed the album for the Alabama Shakes. And he's like, you know, he's mixing music, not jazz. and it was called House of Many Rooms. And I really did shock a lot of people with that album, and I lost some people with that album. But it's funny, and it was so hard psychologically. It was so hard. But in revisiting that music more recently, because we just re-released it last week. And in revisiting
I'm sorry, which one is that called?
It's called House of Many Rooms.
Okay.
And we can play something from it if you want. But you know, in re-releasing that album online and listening to it, Ben and I, we were listening and we were really enjoying it. And we both just said, you know, we put our whole selves into this project. And it wasn't inauthentic. It was absolutely authentic. It was just a different lane. And, you know, and right around the time that I released that album, I remember reading a Taylor Swift interview in Rolling Stone. And she had, I mean, Taylor is a massive star, but even Taylor Swift had this issue. You know, she came from country music.
Yeah.
And when she started doing more pop, she was kind of in between these two worlds. And to some degree, her listeners on both sides were like, some of them were dissatisfied. And she used the phrase, you can't chase 2 rabbits. And so in listening to House of Many Rooms, I immediately wanted to make another album like that. I just said to Ben, can we make another album like that? And he was like, sure, why not? And then I thought, you know, maybe someday, but I think we can take elements of what we found exciting about that music and that project and continue to integrate them in this sort of jazz pop space I'm in, and enjoy the best of both worlds, which is what I've been trying to do since Laila Biali, since the self-titled release. You know, and now I think the fun is in playing a little bit with configuration. So either doing something much more stripped down than I've ever released, or doing something way larger in scope with an orchestra, a symphony orchestra, or both, and then to see how those two palettes, how they inform the artistic choices we make, right?
Right. That's so funny. That's so interesting. Yeah. I'm co-producing a singer Catherine Bostic, who is a great film composer, and one of her, I think, claim to fame is the documentary on Toni Morrison. Really, she's a great songwriter, pianist, singer. She's been in jazz, but she writes, I think I would call it more Americana.
Okay, yeah.
So this record, it started out as this concept of stripped down piano, maybe a cello, that kind of thing, small. Beautiful. But it totally grew into something else, and it's fabulous.
Oh.
And but it's interesting because now she's talking about the next one being really stripped down. So it's we reflect. Well, that's the beautiful thing about it. If we can, we reflect the moment, and
yes.
I certainly also have had different things, but it is what it is. And also I really like, one of my last records was with two great jazz players, Larry Kuntz and Josh Nelson, guitar and piano.
Love it. Ooh.
And I had a few songs on there that I wrote in kind of a series. I call it a writing series, like a painting series. And they were kind of folky, I guess you could say. But like you say, because they were there, and they were through the whole record, which included other jazzier songs like Pensativa and, Lonely Woman and stuff, that it had a voice. It had a core that ran through it. And so, and it was a very satisfying project to do. Really satisfying, because it was a core. It was because of our relationships together, the three of us,
yes.
there was this core, and it was very satisfying, and so I think as an artist, gosh, we have, so much to reflect, right? I mean, it's so important and valuable, what we're doing. And, I just kind of give us a pat on the back.
I mean, we have to pat ourselves on the back these days because we're trying to figure out how to stay vital when we're starved of the thing that drives us, at least me.
Yeah.
Which is performing live and connecting in real time with an audience. And it's not even an audience. I mean, we draw this division, this line between performer and listener, artist, listener, performer, audience. But Cathy, that when we're all in that room together, everybody's in the band. It's like the audience is a part of the band, the sound, the experience, the vibration, and that's what I miss, because that's where community happens in the music. And it brings us together. And to me, that's music at its best, at its most powerful.
I totally agree. I mean, that is the experience. Yeah, when I think of the different gigs that I've really enjoyed, even the ones where I felt awkward somehow for whatever reason,
right.
Just the feeling of the whole experience, the room, the people there. I agree with you. It's really something. I don't feel. It's interesting. I don't feel like I took it for granted. I've heard that comment. Right now, I took it for granted. I don't really feel like I took it for granted. I just feel like I would like to experience it again, and I'd like to experience it across the world. That's the other thing. I was thinking about that this morning for some reason, about being, in Japan or Europe and experiencing something that you cannot experience when you're home. You just don't experience. You don't experience traveling to a different culture, experiencing the culture, and then sharing with the listeners that different culture and your culture and the music, tying you all together. And it's something that I just, wow, I just so hope that comes back into reality.
Me too. Me too. And that's, what you're talking about. It's like it's an exchange and we're changed by it. We are changed by it, not just as musicians, but as people. And, I do think we'll get back to it.
Yeah.
I think it's taking a lot longer than anyone predicted. And in that sense, remember when 2021 came around and we were all like, see ya 2020.
Yeah.
All right, 2021, and hashtag 2021. And 2021 for me has been harder. It's been so much harder than 2020 because there was so much anticipation and hope. And as I watched hope and experienced hope getting deferred again and again and again, I mean, I'm grateful for so many things, and it's important to hold on to gratitude.
Yes.
But this has been a tougher year thus far. And, now my sights are set on 2022, but very cautiously so. I think we are going to be able to get back to some semblance of normalcy, whatever that means. And, and hopefully the new normal will be even better, right? Maybe we'll all respect our world a little more and respect one another a little more. And like you said, we'll really savor. I mean, you and I were already savoring performing live and traveling, and, it wasn't something we took for granted, but oh my gosh, now just the level of appreciation and gratitude that will just bubble up when we're there again, and already is bubbling up just at those little glimpses, right? Like that little virtual gig I got to do today, you getting to play that outdoor gig, right? It's like just these little injections of hope and life and a reminder of why we do what we do. And in the meantime, it has been critical that we do what we do online, because even if people are sick of it, doesn't mean they don't still need it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. There's so many great things that are happening online. I'd like to just ask you quickly, I know you have to go soon.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. The idea of 2 hours just kind of happened naturally, and I didn't, I don't have to stick to 2 hour, 2 hours. I wanted to know, in your writing, do you find that your writing stems from or describes a certain, mostly a particular emotion or idea?
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety. I think for me, Out of Dust, a lot of that music, even Sugar in its cheeky little way, which was very much the outlier on the album, it is about like some mix of the darkness, the dark and the light, from darkness to hope, that sort of transformation. And, I love artists who are political, like Bruce Cockburn, Joni, Leonard Cohen. But, someone like Bruce Cockburn kind of hits you over the head with it a little bit. I always like there to be a thread of levity and light. I don't just want it to be completely dark or completely angry or completely sad. It's multidimensional. But rarely do I just write a happy song, I think my music is the way that I experience life, which is so many emotions at once. There might be one that is sort of predominantly felt in the music or by the listener, but I also want music that's malleable. Do you know what I mean? I want music that's emotionally layered so that somebody who's having a shitty day, you know, can listen to a song of mine, like A Case of You, where it's this profound love song. It is such a beautiful love song. You could be in the throes of your greatest romance, and that song is music to your ears because the love is there. But the pain is there too, and the bitterness. So if you're grieving, then that song can also be for you. And that's music that I love, that has those layers. So it's not a very clear answer, but yeah, I think I got it. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you so much for spending this time. Really appreciate it. And I'm sure my people listening and your people listening and our new people listening will be really overjoyed to see this and hear it. Thank you so much. And
oh, it's my pleasure, Cathy. Thank you. And I'm happy to stick around for a few more minutes if you like. But I know I said to you, I've got these other things I got to get done. And you were very sweet.
Yeah.
So we can wrap it up or we can keep going. It's totally up to you.
Oh, well, I want to keep going.
Let's keep going. My son is actually miraculously quiet in his room. So yeah, let's delve into a few more things and then we'll wrap up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now I'm pretty curious about Clarity, because Clarity keeps saying really beautiful things.
Yes.
That I agree with highly. So who is Clarity, and how is this person connected to you?
Oh my goodness. Well, I don't want to speak for Clarity, but Clarity and I discovered one another through Saturday Night Jazz. I host a national radio show in Canada, but Clarity is in Oregon and has managed to somehow, tune in to the frequency, or I guess via CBC Listen, the app. And there's supposed to be like a geo block or whatever you call it, a geo boundary, where I have some friends stateside who have not been able to tune in, but Clarity has been able to, and Clarity loves CBC, which is like our NPR. Oh. And she's extremely smart. And I'm very thankful for the people in my sphere who keep me on my toes, who sort of love me and accept me for who I am, but love me too much to let me stay that way. And they're not afraid to call me out. And Clarity, right from the get-go, in this very whimsical way, called me out. There was a moment on my show, I'm like mildly dyslexic, I think. I've never been diagnosed. But instead of saying Dexter Gordon, I said Gordon Dexter. And not even my producer caught it. But Clarity caught it, and she kind of went, ha-ha, and often writes in these very pithy, fun, poetic phrases. And and in this she was sort of ribbing me, but also, in a way that wasn't mean. And so there was this like little moment of chemistry and friendship that happened over Twitter. And of course, I've discovered this beautiful, deep soul. She's a beautiful musician, used to play a saxophone and has this sweet dog. And I don't think, Clarity, I don't think you live off the grid, but it's like beautiful Oregon with these lovely, skies, and she tells stories through photos, and but it's just a person of real depth and a poetess and an artist in every sense of the word. And I think that's where we really connect. So I'm excited to go back and look at all the comments.
Right. And tell us about Saturday Night Jazz.
Yeah. So Saturday Night Jazz is a show that I host. It's on Saturday nights from 8 p.m. to midnight and 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. in Atlantic, Canada. And I hate to admit this, but that's what interviews like this are for. I don't choose the music. So I have a producer who chooses the music for the show. That's the CBC Music way. Every CBC Music host has a dedicated producer who programs the songs. I do have veto power. So if I want to say, no, I don't want to hear that song again, or, I can weigh in with my opinion. And then I connect the songs. So, tell stories and talk about the music and try and make the music really friendly to those listening and just be a friendly voice. And I love it. I love it. I've discovered, because I don't choose the music, I have discovered so many new artists that my producer, Lauren Hancock, discovers herself, or, she gets tons of music, obviously, from all across the world coming her way. And so it's been an incredible learning experience. And CVC, they're always kind of growing and making changes. So initially as a host, I was sort of trained, believe it or not to talk about the music very much. They were worried that would be isolating to people who were tuning in that weren't necessarily trained jazz fans.
Yeah.
But now, over time, they're letting me be more myself, and like, just rather than saying, oh, that was a song about the moonlight. Isn't the moonlight beautiful? I get to talk about maybe what the musicians were doing, or tell a story behind the music that might be kind of insidery, but that anybody would find interesting, we hope.
Yeah.
So I'm ever evolving as a host, and I hope that I'll get to stay in that chair for many more years. I've been super grateful for it during pandemic.
How long have you been doing it?
I've been doing it for almost 4 years now. So coming up in September, it'll be 4 years. Yeah, isn't that wild?
Do you do it live, or do you record it and then?
It's a mix. So a lot during pandemic, we've had to pre-record a lot of the shows. Sorry, guys, you're not supposed to know. But because we do it from home, and my husband sets me up in this little makeshift booth. But what I do, Cathy, is almost every Saturday night, I listen. If it's pre-recorded, because that's the route we've had to go during pandemic, I'll listen on Saturday night in real time with the listeners for as long as I can. And then I feel like I'm there, and then if they're tweeting about it, and of course I speak in the present as if I'm there, because if we were live, which, we would want to be under normal circumstances, then, it reflects that moment in time. But because of pandemic restrictions, I have to sort of place myself on that Saturday, a few days ahead, so we can get it done and get it put into the proper channels and all that. It's crazy. My producer's producing the show from Halifax now. She used to be in Toronto with me. Wow. We'd go into the building at CBC and we'd do it all together. But now she's in Halifax and I'm home, and we both have our makeshift setups that we do, and we're making it work.
Yeah, and I would imagine Saturday night kind of is many times a gig night. So,
right.
If you had a gig, you'd have to record a hit anyway, right?
And that would happen a lot during the year, even before pandemic. We would have to grab it well in advance because I'd be on tour, that kind of thing. So
yeah. Somebody early on said you spoke 5 languages.
No, I wish I did. I my sister speaks 5 languages. So my sister Susan, not fluently, but she speaks a little bit of Italian, a little bit of German, French. She's totally fluent in Spanish, and then of course English. So she speaks 5 languages. I speak English and a very little bit of French. I'd love to learn, and a very little bit of Spanish, and a very teeny tiny amount of German, but not even in like a few phrases.
So Ontario's not really French language.
There are a lot of people in Ontario who are dual language or bilingual. Yeah. I'm not one of them, and I would like to be. Quebec is. So if there's one province in Canada where, the whole country has 2 official languages, and it would be awesome if everybody spoke fluent French.
Yeah.
But in Quebec, you actually have a lot of people whose predominant language is French, and English is their second language. And it's been a pandemic goal of mine to learn, but my French, to really improve my French, and I'm not there yet, but Cathy, I'm not giving up. It's going to happen.
That's good. I've been working on Spanish because I learned French first. And but now, because I've been to Japan so much, when somebody speaks to me here in another language, my answer in my head is in Japanese. And it's not that I'm fluent, but that's the way I communicate. I communicate to other languages in Japanese. So
wow,
it's pretty funny. But Japanese, that's a really that's a challenging language to really get fluent in, and so but I when I go there, I think Japanese and I communicate, and people always say that I remind them of a Japanese grandmother. Well, I don't know what that means,
with
but
your
maybe,
beautiful hair.
yeah, well, and even before that, it's my nature, something about like,
Oh,
that I'm very gentle and empathetic, and, I really love Japan, and
love it
probably
too.
was there in another life or something, so
Right, exactly. That is one of my favorite places to go on tour. My husband, he was actually engaged to a Japanese woman, or
ah,
almost engaged. Yeah, Ikuyo. And we both love Japan. We've never been together. He used to tour
oh,
there all the time with Jiro Yoshida, this
ah,
wonderful guitar player. And I've been there several times with Suzanne Vega and also with my own band. And I cannot wait to go back. The people are just,
yeah, they're
oh, what a
special.
special, special culture and
Yeah,
place.
it is. It really
Yeah,
is. It's beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always feel like it is another planet. The
Yeah,
culture is
yeah.
it's similar to ours, but it's so different,
Hmm.
and people are so lovely.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, oh, I just wanted to briefly touch on your touring. You have toured with a lot of people. Have you toured mostly as a backup singer?
No. So I've toured as a pianist, but usually a pianist who also sings. So
Yeah.
keyboardist or pianist, sometimes like a synthesizer player, and where it's about programming all these different sounds. Like for Suzanne Vega, that's what I had to do, and then also singing backup. But with Sting, initially it was just vocals, which was just strange for me because I really didn't consider myself much of a singer when I got asked by Lisa Fisher to audition for that gig. So that was cool. But now I've had the privilege of also playing with Sting, which was felt more somehow like as it should be. And I actually fell in love with his music because of Kenny Kirkland,
Oh, yeah.
the incredible
Yeah.
pianist, right?
Yeah.
So
I know. Me too. I'm a big long time fan of Sting's for
yeah.
various reasons, and so boy, that must have just I can almost feel through you, your excitement and love to be involved with that.
It
Must
was
have been really
amazing.
beautiful.
And I'm going to say this here. I never said it online, and some people probably guessed. He's one of these guys who, I mean, he's a hero for me. And he just keeps coming back into my life. It's so interesting. And, Ben and I were really suffering with a serious case of the pandemic blues at the beginning of this year. And then out of nowhere, a couple of months ago, Sting reaches out. It was the funniest thing, Cathy, because he was trying to call me. And I kept ignoring him because I didn't know it was him. And and anyway, he finally reached me, and I was totally shocked and excited. And he asked me to demo some of his new songs with
Ah,
him. He
wow.
wanted a female voice. And it was because he thought I was fluent in French. One of the songs was in French. And so I got to sing with Sting en français, and then that was going really well, and he was so pleased. So he asked me to sing another song, and I got to, a sneak peek at songs he's developing for his next record. He's probably going to get some wildly famous singers to step into those parts. But I was so blessed to be the one helping workshop the material. And it was wild. He was calling me 3 times, 4 times a day sometimes for several days in a row. And I just thought, this is wild.
That definitely
And
got you out of the blues.
yeah, totally got me out of the blues. And Ben too, because Ben was really involved. He got Ben to play some percussion, and yeah, he just has remained a big presence for us. And he, in his way, he considers us family, and that has meant so much to me. Because I'm not Joe Laurie. I mean, Joe Laurie, I actually recommended her for the gig, if you can believe
She's
it.
fabulous
She's
too.
fabulous, and
Yeah.
she ended up. I got pregnant and
Oh,
left the fold, And then she went off and toured with him for like 7 years, and he sang at her wedding. And, they really are like family.
Yeah.
But I've kind of, peripherally, and then also sometimes very much in the mix, been part of that family. And he's said as much, and that just really blesses me. Not just because I'm starstruck, because he's a beautiful person. He, to this day, is one of the hardest working, most extraordinary musicians out there.
Yeah.
He's restless in the best way, always producing new things. And that's who I want to be when I'm, God, he's almost 70, right? He's almost 70.
Yeah.
And he just has not lost that drive and that joy. And the man's a genius. I mean, he's a bona fide genius.
I was totally thrilled with his show.
I loved it too. I loved it too.
Yeah, and I just, of course you hear people liked it, people didn't, whatever. But I was totally in love with it. I thought it was great on so many different levels, and it just supported what I had always felt about him, which was exactly what you're saying. A real person who is driven and a really great artist, and talking about, what we were talking about earlier, like being unafraid to reveal yourself going through something new or hard. I mean, wow, that was that show. I mean, man, he really
100%. So we're talking about The Last Ship, if anybody is wondering what we're talking about. And Cathy, me and Joe and Rob Mathis, who's become a big player in Sting's life. He's a producer and just incredible, all around incredible musician. We were all sitting at Sting's dinner table in New York because we were involved in some of the promotional stuff for The Last Ship.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget him sharing how vulnerable he felt. He just said it takes one critic who doesn't like the show in the New York Times or whatever to kind of sink the whole thing, if you'll pardon the pun.
Yeah.
And he came up against huge criticism, and they were rigorous in rewriting the book and changing the staging. And, we saw a very different show in New York in its early stages than we saw in Toronto. And I'm sure you got a different show in LA.
Yeah.
And so he, that it's that restlessness in him, and he wants the music and his projects to be a success. And that's not just about, again, rave reviews. It's more about how it's connecting with people, because he pours his whole self into these projects and his resources, and to see Sting vulnerable, wow, that was a lesson. Because it was like, right, even somebody who has, how many Grammys to his name, even he is willing to put himself in a new, push himself out of his comfort zone and make himself vulnerable. And he's not immune. So that was something to see.
Yeah. Somebody asked about your relationship with, musical relationship with Fred Hirsch.
Oh yeah. So I studied, wow, that's somebody who really knows me from way back when. So I got a Canada Council grant in 2003 to go study in New York City. And I was going to study with a few different people, actually. But Fred is someone who I always wanted to study with. And I just took a couple lessons with him. And I love him. I love his music. I love who he is as a person. His whole story and coming through that coma, and just the music that has emerged since. He's definitely played a big role in my formative years as a jazz musician, and especially as a pianist and as a writer, as a composer, not a songwriter, but an instrumental composer. Because for many years, my heroes were Jim McNeely and Maria Schneider, and I wanted to write instrumental music for a large ensemble, Kenny Wheeler, but then I ended up moving kind of away from that thread and that dream, and singing and then moving towards a more kind of pop jazz approach. And I've seen Fred at a couple gigs, like when I was living in New York, and I always was worried he would judge. He would judge me and like, what happened, Laila? Why did you move so far away from this sort of contemporary instrumental jazz that you were creating?
Yeah.
But he never seemed to judge me, and just was always supportive. And
Yeah.
Just a real sweet, sweet human being.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine. Um, well, let's see. I mean, I'm excited because I had more time.
Oh, I know. Well, and I actually probably am now looking at the time and I probably should go. Is there any
Okay.
other question that anyone else wants to ask or that, I'm seeing friends on here. Belinda. Hi, Belinda. Hi, Trisha. Hi, Kirk. Oh, it's really great. The crew. Oh, Fred Shortland. So he worked with me with Sting way back when. Oh, this is cool. Anyway, yeah, anything else, Cathy,
Well,
that
no, I just want to say thank you, and it's just been such a pleasure, and I feel, I feel like you're a kindred spirit, and I look forward to talking to you again, just even off of this kind of vehicle. But yeah, it's been really beautiful, and yeah, after you go, I'll just tell the people, about who's coming on next. But
Oh, awesome.
thank you so much.
Thank you for having me
Really,
and stay safe, stay well,
thank
everybody.
you.
This too will pass. And I do think we're going to come out the other side a little more refined, like that pure gold in the crucible. So it's going to get better. So thank you, Cathy.
Thanks, Layla.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Say hi to your husband for me.
I will. Bye.
So, isn't she just burning off beautiful energy? Wow, very lovely being. I just wanted to tell you all who's coming tomorrow and the next day. So, live tomorrow will be Rio Sakai. And Rio is the artistic director for the Jazz Gallery in New York. And very interesting. She came originally from Japan, and she's been extremely successful and very respected. And that's Tuesday. And then Wednesday, having the great pianist, B3 player, Brian Charette, Toby. So I know I just made Toby's day. So Brian Charette is really a great player and a really nice person. I'm looking forward to speaking with him. And then this week I will be doing archives from Thursday to Sunday. Every now and then I do a live one in there because somebody I'd like to interview can't do Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. So Thursday is Nick Mancini, a really outstanding vibes player, really outstanding, who lived in LA for a long time and was, he was one of the leaders of the community musically, and he moved to I think it's Oklahoma, and anyway, he moved right before the pandemic hit, which was, crazy timing because he would have really made a huge mark there if he had been able to go out a lot and play. And I'm sure he's still doing fine, but I think he really would have, like announced that he was there in a big way. And then the next day, Friday, my old friend Russell Ferrante, great pianist, he formed with his other bandmates. He formed the Yellow Jackets, and that was back in the probably early '80s. They were playing for his name is Robin Ford. So Robin Ford, great guitar player, kind of blues but jazz influences, and his backup band included Russell Ferrante, and then slowly the other members of the Yellow Jackets became the band, and then the manager said, "Why don't we make a band out of you guys, you backup guys? Call you the Yellow Jackets," and that's what happened. Anyway, Russell Ferrante is a brilliant musician and composer and arranger, and talk about a nice guy. And then Saturday, the 24th, these are the archives I'm talking about. Saturday is with Peter Eldridge, wonderful singer, composer, teacher, one of the founding members of the New York Voices, pretty outstanding guy. And then Sunday, my dear friend who was on the YouTube stream today, Kiki Wow, who she kind of reminds me of me I'm in the jazz world, kind of creating things, venues, and creating things that the community can contribute to and be part of and help the community. But she's more in the folk and acoustic rock area. She lived in Monterey or Carmel for a long time, and did that there. And then she moved recently to near Bramson. And so she's just a doll. And just as a word, for those of you in LA, I am working on Saturday at the conference room in Playa Vista. We did that 2 weeks ago. I have a guitar trio, and Brad Rabuchin on guitar, John Leftwich on bass, my dear friend, and on drums, Aaron Sefferty. It's a really nice place, 6 to 9. Call and make a reservation, believe it or not, because it's, outside and they're social distanced, but it's really beautiful. It's just a great hang. And the first set will be me, and then after that, we'll have a jam. And that's going to be really fun. So that's called the Conference Room in Playa Vista in Los Angeles. And that's this coming Saturday. And then next week, just to give you an idea, we have Stacy Hoffman, who was one of the founders of Jazz Camp West, which now is called something else, and Jason Harnell, an outstanding musician, drummer, and Wednesday, an outstanding singer named Nancy Reed, who had a musical relationship, which is how I found her, through Dave Liebman. So just going to keep going here, and I want to hear your thoughts. Feel free to reach out to me. I have a long list of people who are coming. You can see that on my website, CathySegal-Garcia.com. And I wish you well. Have a great day, and hopefully see you tomorrow. And if I don't, then look me up sometime. By the way, I have archives that you can look at. They live on Dropbox, and you can just go to my website, follow the event, and in the event, the archive link is there. And please feel free to look and find your favorite artists. Actually, for you Canadian people, Mark Jordan will be coming up. I think it's, next week, next Thursday. I'm sure you know who Mark Jordan is. He's an incredible songwriter, singer, guitarist, painter. Great, great, great human. So, all you humans, goodbye. Have a really good one. See you again. Bye.